Hi! Since this is the last episode of Future Neuroscientist, I will give you a recap of my neuroscience studies. So basically, I will tell you the reason why I started the studies in the first place. I will shortly tell you how the studies were, like what kind of courses we had, how I see the studies benefit to become as a scientist. I will give you all the study tips, what I found really useful. And then I will share what were the hardest and the best parts of the studies. And finally, some future perspectives. So, in which kind of job positions I could apply, but also I'm gonna share what I'm gonna do next. The reason why I started studying neuroscience master's degree was basically that I was already in the field of research. I was working in breast cancer research, and while working there, I understood that I am a scientist from my mindset and I love working in the field of research. I also realized that I want to move forward in my career and that the topic needs to be my passion. So I understood I want to work in science, but I also understood that I need to study more to get forward, and the topic needed to be something I'm passionate about. And so I started my neuroscience master's studies at the University of Helsinki. I remember when we started our studies, I was so excited to learn everything about brain, and now I can see why it was important, but back then I feel it was a little bit struggle when we started because we focused a lot to electrophysiology. Although I find it interesting, but it's not easy topic to study. So basically we needed to understand how neurons are firing, so how they are communicating. So I feel basically the first half a year we did other studies too, but that was the main focus, to understand how the neurons communicate to each other. So we needed to understand chemistry and physics. The structure of the studies is basically that you need to complete 120 credits, which will take approximately 2 years to complete. 60 credits out of those 120 are common studies for everyone. You need to complete them. It also includes the master's thesis, but basically they were like cellular physiology, cellular neurobiology, systems in neuroscience, and so on. And then you need to choose your study track. I chose to continue with the neuroscience study track. So basically the other half of the studies, you can choose from several courses how you will structure your own studies. You can also take the studies from other programs, but they need to be related to the topic you are studying. For example, in my case, I was able to take some courses from the Translational Medicine master's program. I completed more than 120 credits, so I took a little bit more courses. So I was able to take, for example, courses about leadership, which I find it's really, really important, especially if you are dreaming about your own research group. But I think it's also important to understand, even though you would just lead your project. The first half a year when we had the common studies with all the students, I paid attention a lot, like what are the topics I'm most interested in. And that knowledge I used later on when I chose other courses. For example, I took courses like translational psychiatry, courses related to cognitive neuroscience. I also took courses like journal club, so I learned to present my ideas and also I got the chance to read more papers. I took courses about nutrition, sleep, drug development, about nervous system diseases, and so on. And the last half a year I spent with my master's thesis, which I happily conducted in Australia at the Monash University, where I focused on the eating disorders and psychedelics. So now when I look back, the courses I chose, they were really like supporting me towards my master's thesis. Although I believe all the courses and the knowledge you will gain from there is really important. It's important to also not to just focus for one topic, but take few, so you get some wider image what is done in the field. So yes, of course, I see the value of those courses, but also I think even more important, while I was studying, I kind of grew as a scientist. So we had, for example, several projects where you learn to collaborate with people, structure your own study, you learn how to present your ideas and your results, you learn to find the correct information, you learn to read papers, you learn how to manage your time. So a lot of valuable skills in addition what is included to the actual course topic. The tips what I would give, I think it's really, really important to learn to read the papers. This might sound funny, but there come so many publications all the time. So first of all, you need to learn to find the papers, but also kind of scan them through really fast. And then after that, when you find the right paper you want to focus, then kind of read that. Otherwise, I would just like Google papers and read them all, and that's kind of waste of time. Not waste of time, of course, it's good to read papers, but it's better to read papers you actually should read than all of them. So what comes to reading papers, scanning them, just like headings and then the images, captions for the images and the results. I usually start from the abstract. I just read the abstract and then I read something about the conclusions or discussion part. So I also find if they have something really interesting there. And then I go to the images and their captions, and then I decide if I will read the whole paper. So that would be my number one tip. Learn to read papers. And also when it comes to papers, I would attend to all possible journal clubs. So the basic idea in journal club is that you read a paper and then you will present it to your peers. I feel this also kind of motivates you to read the paper because you have a deadline there, and you will learn to present the paper in a short time, which I find is really important also whenever you are doing your own research and you need to present it, for example, in seminars. So that would be my study tip number 2. Attend to journal clubs. My number 3 tip would be that allow some time to your creativity. At least in my case, I felt there were quite a lot of information coming in, and I needed to accept that I'm not able to remember all the tiniest details immediately, that I need to allow some time and trust that they will be repeated when I study further. Because if I would use all my time to just trying to remember and like memorize everything and not allowing time for creativity, I feel that's kind of losing part of being scientist. Because scientists needs a lot of creativity. Because you need to be ready to think outside of the box. And I think that's really, really important. Like when you are defining your own research question, or even though you are working in some project and there happens something or doesn't happen anything, and you need to continue forward. So then you need to use your brain and try to think outside of that box. That is there some solution I can go this question around, or how I will answer this question. So instead of just trying to memorize everything, I started to trust that I will remember this later on, and at the moment I'm kind of diving deep into the topic I'm really interested in and let myself wonder what kind of questions comes to my mind. So I think this is really important study tip. Allow some time for the creativity. The last tip, it's bunch of tips, I guess, is pay attention to the things you are interested in. Pay attention to your weaknesses and your strengths. So when you pay attention to your interests, it's easier to continue to the direction you want to continue. That's quite obvious. But when you pay attention to your strengths, you're able to put those to your CV, you know what are your skills and they may benefit for someone else. But when you pay attention to your weaknesses, you know where you need to become better. This is really obvious thing, but I think this is often forgotten. Because I don't know about you, but at least my mindset has been sometimes that I want to be perfect in everything all the time, but that's not the case. It's okay to not master everything from the beginning, and more important is to see those things you are not mastering yet. And maybe they are things you would need later on. For example, when I started my studies, I have already worked in science, so I kind of know how it works. I know many techniques. I'm used to the pressure, fast-changing situations, and so on. But back then, even though I'm used to use English, I wasn't too kind of comfortable of presenting things. So I decided before I started my studies that I need to learn talking English. So I started this YouTube channel. And when I now look back to the first episodes, I gotta say, I have become better. They are not beautiful. So yes, as a summary, all the tips. Read papers, learn to present those, allow some time to creativity, pay attention to your interests, weaknesses, and strengths. And one more actually. I would collect all the papers. I have talked about this previously, but I would collect all the papers somewhere, for example, to Excel sheet, and just give a short note what the paper is about, so it's easier to go back to the papers you have already read. So I got this question that what were the hardest and best parts of studying? I would say that the hardest part is that there comes so much information you need to ingest, so there is not too much free time. And when you have your free time, because of the information load, that's all what it's gonna be in your head. So the things you just studied, you will not get rid of. I'm sorry for all my friends who got to see me, because the discussion was probably mainly focusing for those. I think the pressure is quite high, or why I say quite high, it's super high in science in general, so you will face that when you study. And I also think writing a thesis was one of the most challenging things, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, it's also a really good thing, an inspiring thing, but it was one of the most challenging parts, because I know that's the time when you are tested as a scientist. You need to kind of define your project, you need to be able to manage your time, manage collaboration, you need to maybe learn something new, then you need to do the actual research, actual lab work, then you need to be able to write something what makes sense in a fairly short time. So I think just that is super challenging, but I would name that also as the best part of the studies, because then you can focus for things what inspires you the most. You are allowed to use your creativity and you can show that you have grown to real scientists. So it has both sides. I also think one of the best parts is that there are a lot of like-minded people, so kind of being part of this community. And because I have really curious mind, I think for me it was just really important that I was able to use it in a really creative way. So yeah, I think those were the best parts of studying. Obviously, one of the most asked question I think this is most asked question whenever anyone finalizes anything, people are asking what next. And one thing is to ask what you can do with the degree. I think I will not have a clear answer for that. And I think that's the same case whatever I have studied and graduated. I do the research, so I have checked what kind of titles people can have. You can be scientific writer, you can be researcher, you can be clinical research associate, you can be inside consultant, you can work with data. So there are a lot of things you can do with the degree. And I think the most important thing is that you need to so if you are graduating as a neuroscientist, you need to ask with what topic you want to continue working and what kind of tasks or things you want to do in your work. Because you can also come up with a total different title that I just mentioned and work there, but still use the things you learned while you conducted your degree. For example, if you are more into marketing side of things, could you combine your knowledge and skills to the field of marketing? A good example of this, what I'm now trying to say, is that when I graduated as a biotech engineer, so my previous education, there were so many options you can use that degree. You can use your degree in a healthcare industry, some chemical laboratories, food industry. In some places they take care of waste. I don't know how those places are called. But anyways, it was so many things you could use your degree. So the first thing what I asked for myself back then was what I'm interested in. And I was interested in about human health. So I started exploring different positions from there, and somehow I ended up to work in academia. So the same thing I'm facing right now, although of course people are curious what I'm doing next. So I have applied to my PhD and currently I'm waiting the results about those. And I have this really interesting research question in my mind and I really would like to focus for that for a while. Wish me luck with my application so then I can maybe continue recording the next study journey. Alright, that's all. I'm super thankful that you have followed my journey and made me better speaker, and I'm feeling grateful that I have been able to maybe help you and share my excitement. Yeah, I don't know how to end this. Well, bye.